Joining us now is filmmaker James Fox. He's got a new documentary out, Moment of Contact. It's been out for a little while. He was on the Joe Rogan Experience, and it details an extraordinary incident in Brazil from the 1990s. James, we're very excited to have you join our show and to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's our pleasure.
Let's put the poster up there on the screen for those who are interested, and I do encourage everyone to go out and to rent the documentary, to watch the documentary wherever it's available. Moment of Contact, the Roswell of Brazil. James, for those who didn't see you on the Joe Rogan Experience, can you just describe a little bit about what you find and investigate in the documentary about the so-called Roswell incident in Brazil, Virginia?
Yeah, so it's funny. It's one of those cases where people that are familiar with my work, I've been on Joe Rogan before with a film I did called The Phenomenon. Mm-hmm. I worked a little bit with former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid and Podesta and a handful of others, both Republicans and Democrats. And so I sort of developed a level of credibility that I never, as a citizen, never had before. So I really went out on a limb making this documentary because this is about an alleged UFO crash that happened in 1996 in Varginha, Brazil, in the state of Minas Gerais, which is about 4 or 5 hours to the north of Sao Paulo. And I knew Joe Rogan heard about the case like a number of times. He had some of his guests talking about it. We had sent him links. The level of skepticism is warranted, and I understand that. But all I ask people is that suspend judgment and just listen to the evidence of the people that were there, the firsthand eyewitness testimony from military officers, from firemen, from doctors, from civilians, lawyers. It's absolutely mind-bending. And what you're left with is something truly extraordinary took place in Varginha, Brazil, January 20th, January 1996.
Yeah. Well, I watched the film last night, and what was most persuasive to me was the fact that you had so many witnesses. And these aren't like, UFO buffs who are deep into space, or it's not just like one-off person who you could dismiss as a kook. These are just like regular Brazilian people, families, kids, business people, whatever, who are telling you about what they saw and experienced on that day. The part that I actually find kind of the hardest to believe is the fact that the Brazilian military and working in conjunction with the US military are able to marshal this response so effectively and so quickly and to shut everything down. Like that level of competence and international coordination was actually the part that I found the hardest to believe.
What'd you think?
I don't blame you one bit. I actually had people like Leslie Kean, who was one of the contributing editors to the New York Times story that exposed the secret Pentagon UFO program in December of 2017. It was Helene Cooper, Leslie Kean, and Ralph Blumenthal. Anyway, Leslie was like, "Ooh, are you sure you want to report on this case?" I said, "Leslie, I've known Leslie for quite some time." I said, "Leslie, I think there's a lot to it. I really do." And long story short, she reached into her deep contacts. She went public with this about 2 weeks ago, intel contacts off the record, and they told her that it happened. So the fact that she's come forward and said that, and I've talked to other people like Lou Elizondo, who's also said to me, I learned that this happened during my time at ATIP.
Yeah, let's, for those, James, who aren't, familiar with the acronyms, with Lou Elizondo and all this, and even with Virginia, no, it's completely fine. Let's just describe the timeline of January 1996 about what witnesses report in the film. You don't have to give away everything from the film, but the broad contours, the Brazilian and the U.S. military response, alleged response, and then some of what you've been able to uncover with new reporting, which we're going to get to in a little bit.
Yes. So let me just quickly finish what I was just saying in terms of the U.S. involvement. I've been investigating this case for 12 years. A lot of other people that have been investigating in Brazil a lot longer than me. And during that 12-year investigation, I was going back and forth to Brazil countless times, a month each time. I was completely unaware that there was any American involvement. I actually learned that on the last trip just a year and a half, 2 years ago. And so I'll quickly tell you that every military person that we met with, and they're all featured in the film at some point, particularly in the credits at the end, all said the Americans were involved. And while we were there the last time, this was shocking. was that the military flight control officer. Now, when you're in the fire department, you're also military. When you're in the police department, you're also military. When you're a flight radar control officer who monitors airplanes that come in and out of Brazil, you're also military. And this guy, Carlos Feres, F-E-R-E-S, came forward on the record saying that he was in charge that night and saw the United States Air Force plane come in without authorization from the Brazilian government. It came in and it landed directly. This is on the record. You can go and look it up. It came in and it landed in Campinas without any Brazilian authorization. Okay, he kept saying USAF. I was like, USAF? What's this guy talking about? United States Air Force. So, and it landed in Campinas, and we have testimony from the military base EZA from people that were there that went on the record that said they drove these creatures to Campinas on that date. So we have testimony from military personnel on the ground, some civilians and doctors and lawyers about this incident. And then we have confirmation from the flight control officer, who's also part of the military, who said he saw the flight come in. And it's truly extraordinary. So let me say that in and around the town of Varginha, Brazil, January 1996, you had farmers, you had truckers, you had professors, the one in particular, Carlos de Souza, who's also an ultralight pilot, who witnessed a cylindrical, sort of cigar-shaped object about the size, a little bigger than a really big school bus. It was metallic. It didn't have any wings. It didn't have any exhaust vents or visible means of propulsion. It was just a cylindrical shaped object with a gash in the side of it that looked like it was in trouble. We filmed a number of witnesses that saw this in the middle of the night, and it was just struggling to stay. According to the witnesses, it was struggling. It looked like it was going down, but struggling. And then eventually there was a witness at a place called Maialini Farm on the outskirts of Varginha that saw it impact the ground. Went up there, military arrived. He was met at gunpoint to leave the area. Never once did Carlos de Souza think that I just witnessed something that crashed potentially from another world. He thought it was some super secret government craft. He had no idea. A few days later, there were reports in the town of these like 4 feet tall. I know this sounds crazy. Believe me, I do. But these are very credible, and lots of reports coming in about entities that have brown skin, no hair, oily, big red eyes, ridges on the forehead, spindly, weak, frightened, and scared, cowering, non-threatening. And these reports came in from fire department, from police department, from local civilians. I mean, one of the most incredible accounts is from 3 girls in broad daylight that came within 8 to 10 feet of this creature. And it's truly remarkable.
And reportedly, you know, what you report on in the film is that one individual who was charged with capturing these things and, you know, actually had it reportedly in his arms, he ends up dying in a mysterious way thereafter. Can you speak to, I understand you've learned a little bit more about what might have happened there.
So this is an ongoing investigation, and just last week, we got a hold of the 2 forensic pathologists who worked on the deceased military officer doing the autopsy. And they're coming forward for the first time. Now, they're providing a very detailed, long-form autopsy report that Leslie Kane is actually having translated medically, professionally, because it's very technical. And but they gave us brief statements that we're going to share, that I've just shared with you. I was going to share that with Joe Rogan, but we just forgot. We didn't get to it. So I'm handing these to you. These are brief statements with translations, and you could play them directly from the horse's mouth from the forensic pathologist who did work on the deceased military officer.
Great. We have some of those clips here. For those who are listening, I encourage you to come watch this on YouTube because we have subtitles. Let's take a listen.
É a primeira vez que eu faço depoimento em relação ao caso Xereza, que poderia ter envolvimento, de fato, com algum ser extraterrestre, uma estranheza, pelo diferenciado discurso que ele coloca em relação a essa questão da bactéria, que ele já tem uma experiência de mais de 70 anos ali.
Esse alienígena trouxe a bactéria de fora. tem o personagem ET e tem o personagem, a bactéria da unha do ET.
So some of what we're seeing there, James, there's longer video, of course, which I'm sure you'll put in a future film. But one of the points that is being taken away is that these pathologists describe a bacteria that's never been seen before on Earth. It ended up killing a person who ended up transporting these creatures and alluding also to ET and kind of the light at the end of his film. Can you translate some of that for us as to
I get the
big
chills.
takeaways?
I get the chills as someone who's been looking into this case for 12 years, and I know that Marco Leal, my Brazilian counterpart, has been doing it much longer than I have. The fact that we've got these guys, and I tell you, I literally was doing Zoom calls a couple days leading up to going on Joe Rogan, begging and pleading with these doctors to come forward. And one doctor said, hey, if he comes forward, I'll come forward with him. We'll do it together, power in numbers. And then ultimately they did. And they provided us with long form. But basically what they're saying was in their entire career, they've never seen anything like this bacterial infection that killed a perfectly healthy 23-year-old military police officer. And they said that we even interviewed Dr. Cesario, who worked on him while he was alive. He said, I threw the kitchen sink at him and nothing was working. And this bacteria, it was just they've never seen anything like it. So they took samples, which I know that they're going to have more details on about this type of bacteria, but those are just the initial statements that they're making. And again, I have to remind your audience, this is an ongoing investigation. I'm not going to put this in another film. I'm going to put it out to the general public immediately. Great. Because I think that this is a story that could prove once and for all, could settle the debate once and for all, whether these things are real or not, because we have a case, unlike Roswell, that's so recent that the vast majority of people and witnesses are still alive, and they're coming forward right now in droves.
Yeah. I mean, James, my takeaway from this was either an alien craft landed in Varginha, Brazil in 1996, or somebody escaped from some crazy biolab with an unknown, strain of bacteria or something, that then the U.S. government and the Brazilian military hopped in, and it created some very strange disturbances in the town, of which many of these people never forget. I mean, you can tell from the documentary, this is a traumatic experience. None of these people wanted to come forward. In many cases, you describe having to go through and solicit and beg people to come forward. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Well, while we're on the subject matter of crash material, just before we get into this, your audience just has to hear this, okay? This is the recently passed, excuse me while I put my old man glasses on, UAP legislation by Senator Gillibrand and Marco Rubio, Gallego, and Gallagher also contributed to this. But in any case, this just passed, signed into law, the UAP legislation. I'm going to read you one of the bits of text. And I'm going to ask your audience, what prompted this? Okay, here we go. Any activity or program by a department or agency of the federal government or contractor of such a department or agency relating to unidentified anomalous phenomena, including with respect to material retrieval, material analysis, reverse engineering, research and development, detection and tracking. They talk about potentially crashed materials, like recovered UFOs. The legislation's right here. You can go read it. And they're providing whistleblowers protection.
And James, are you hopeful that some of these DC-based efforts on Capitol Hill will lead to increased transparency and more information?
Well, so everybody thinks that there was this sudden epiphany by the U.S. government to provide Joe public with far more data on the phenomenon. That's not what happened. What happened was there were a couple of insiders like Christopher Mellon, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, and Lou, who ran the ATIP program, and a handful of others decided, wow, the level of secrecy is ridiculous. We are going to find a loophole, walk some evidence out of the Pentagon, which is what happened, and directly onto the front page of the New York Times. Now, the problem is the government can't put the genie back in the bottle. Okay, so the intelligence agency, when I met with Senator Harry Reid, former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, about this topic, he said that when he launched the UAP task force, it went from OSAP to ATIP, Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. He said that the intelligence agencies were digging in their heels. They were fighting, kicking, scratching, and biting. They didn't want this. And I suspect the same thing is occurring right now. However, what I'm doing and what many others are doing, we're meeting with the intel folks on the inside that have already gone to testify to AARO, which is run by Sean Kirkpatrick. That's the new UAP task force. And they're going on camera with people like myself. And I've gotten a number of them on camera already. And they're disclosing not the classified parts, but what they've disclosed basically behind closed doors. In other words, I'm providing the names of the programs. I'm providing the names of the individuals involved with the programs, the locations of these programs. And in fact, if you get me the classifications, I can walk you in the door. So the clearances. So if the government is not going to release it, we're going to release this to the public so they'll know that this is going on. So we're just trying to force the government hands. And look, there's a lot of elected officials like Senator Gillibrand and Rubio, Mark Warner, Gallego, Andre Carson, that are really batting for us, that are really, they need our support, but they're going to bat. They're not trying to cover this up. They're trying to actually get this open, but the intelligence agencies are being very difficult. There's nothing in it for them to share what they have. And there's a lot of amazing photographic evidence just behind that wall that we're talking about as well.
It's so frustrating, James. I feel the same way that you do. I hear the exact same thing. And the overwhelming thing that I hear from inside the intel community is they're terrified because they just don't know what's going on. And they don't want to admit that to all of us. They're terrified.
That's exactly right. So, I just talked to Christopher Mellon, who's also got clearances, who's seen the satellite data, photographic evidence. And he said, well, I'm only talking about it because Ratcliffe talked about it. But I'll tell you right now, it's amazing. And I said, Christopher, please, because I'm friends with Christopher. Can you give me a little more? He's like, well, if you imagine like full 4K of craft, it's about as good as that. And it's just behind that level of secrecy. So it's only a matter of time where some of that stuff's coming out. I'm very confident. It's just a matter of when.
Wow. Yeah, we can only hope. James, is there anything you want to say to the audience before we let you get out of here?
Well, I would say if you check out Moment of Contact and you still feel nothing absolutely extraordinary took place in January of 1996 in Varginha, Brazil, chicken parmesan dinner on me.
All right. I love it. People can go and watch the documentary. Follow him at James Fox. Was it James C. Fox on Twitter, I believe?
Yeah, it's at James C. Fox.
There you go. He's a madman. He just opened up his DMs. I don't know why anybody would.
I know. Crazy.
Good luck to you, James.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you, sir.
Great to have you.
Welcome
Thanks,
back
James.
anytime. Thank you. Man, I love talking to that guy. Really interesting subject. Thank you guys so much for supporting us, for all of the monthly, yearly, and lifetime members who have been helping us with our new studio and have been signing up for our mission. We're very excited. We've been having absolute gangbuster days here over at Breaking Points, which is kind of amazing because it's not even like there's some major tentpole.
We're not into the heat of the presidential election yet. There's not. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah,
Vice is dying. BuzzFeed is dead. Many of the new media companies, which are supposed to define the 2010s, are literally bankrupt. Meanwhile, things here are better than ever. I suspect the same for many of our friends in independent media. It's a great time. It's a great time to be in this game, and we couldn't be in it without all of you. We love you. We have a great Counterpoint show for everybody tomorrow, and we will see you all on Thursday.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Saagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.